Promised Land 1250 to 587 BC by the Ragnar Brothers. This is an unofficial and unauthorised how to play video. You will need one player board, 8 royal tokens, 12 kingdom tokens, a whole wodge of money of 3 different kinds, gold, silver and bronze, which are not interchangeable. Units to place on the map. Each one of these is double-sided. The yellow and red represent the Hebrew tribes. The green and blue represent some of the local neighbouring tribes. The purple and silver represent tribes who live a little more distantly. Each player will choose a colour. So for example, the green player will choose green, 6 patriarchs and 2 tokens to keep track of where they are on the royal track and the kingdom track. In my version, the green player is going to play as Hebrew, so both their tokens will be placed on the 7-branched candlestick side, one down here, one up there. I'm also using wooden tokens that came with the Kickstarter campaign rather than the stand-up counters which come with the normal game. I'm going to be demonstrating a 3-player game in which red are going to play and blue are going to play the heathen players, and they are represented by the bull idol rather than the candlestick. So again, each of these players will place their tokens on the kingdom track and the royal track. The royal track tokens are shuffled and placed at random on the spaces here and then turned over. The kingdom tokens must first be sorted into 3 sets of 4. This first set are all worth 1 victory point, and these are shuffled randomly and placed face down in the first 4 slots. The next 4 are worth 2 victory points and are shuffled randomly into the next 4 slots, and the third 4 are worth 3 points victory and are shuffled randomly into the final slots and then all revealed. On the map there are certain cities that are symbolised by yellow circles. This is where you place your city token, except for Heshbon, the starting place of the Hebrew southern tribes, where an Ark of the Covenant is placed. In the other places, a city is placed, of which there are 6. And where there are 2 circles, a temple is also placed. Again, I'm using the wooden pieces rather than the stand-up pieces that come with the game. The wooden pieces came with Kickstarter. Each player draws at random from the artifact bag 1 artifact, which is theirs to keep for the duration of the game. They will also get an amount of money, and this will vary depending on the amount of points that the artifact is worth. For a 1-point artifact, the player will collect 6 coins, and the colour of the coins is represented by the colour of the cost in the bottom right, in this case silver. 1 point, 6 silver coins. So that goes, for example, to the Hebrew player. The red player has drawn at random a 2-point artifact, which will give them 4 coins and gold because of the colour. The blue player has a 3-point artifact which will only give him 2 coins, and the colour at the bottom right says that they will be bronze. So those are the starting artifacts and the starting money. We now need to put units on the board, 1 in each territory. The sort of unit is described by the picture and the colour in each territory. So, for example, the 2 Hebrew tribes will be placed here and here. Around the edge we have Egyptians. In Beersheba we have Edomites. In Bozrah we have Moabites, and so on. Each of the areas which does not contain one of the specified tribes is filled with a Canaanite tribe, which are the purple ones. At this point, it may seem that the game is going to be about territory control, similar to Risk, but this is not so. Over the course of the game, each player will control one kingdom for a short while. Whilst they control the kingdom, they may be able to move up on the kingdom track, depending on how well their particular kingdom performs. But their real presence on the board is represented by the patriarchs, which will occupy various territories over the course of the game. I like to think of these not as individuals, but as families. For example, the family of farmers who are occupying the plains, where they will bring income every turn for the green player. As long as there is peace in that territory, they'll remain there. But if war comes to the territory, they will be forced to move, maybe elsewhere within the same kingdom. Maybe they will be forced off the board altogether. So one of the objects of playing your turn is not only to move upon the kingdom track by doing well with your kingdom, but to force out one's opponent's patriarchs and make room for one's own patriarchs in the most lucrative territories, so that they will bring you money and earn less for your opponent. The money that you earn from your patriarchs is vital for advancing on the royal track, and also for buying artifacts, which are supposed to be in this display, and I haven't yet put them out, but I will do so now. 20 artifacts at random. One more thing before you actually begin the play is to place patriarchs onto the board. The heathen players, in this case blue and green, will take it in turns to place one patriarch on each territory. There are 2 rules when placing patriarchs. One is that you may never have 2 patriarchs of the same colour on the same territory. This would be illegal. Another rule is that you can never have 2 patriarchs of the same type in the same territory. That would also be illegal. However, different colours and different types would be perfectly legal. It's possible to have up to 3 patriarchs in the same territory. The placing of the patriarchs will depend on where you think you can earn most money. Priests, for example, will earn money by being in temples, so the red player may start by placing his patriarch with one of the temples. The blue player may do likewise with the other temple. The red players, merchants, will earn most money if they are by a port. There are 3 ports. One there, up by Tyre. Accio is the other port. Ignore the harbour pictured, that is misleading. The port is Accio. And the other port on the board is in Bosra. There is a picture here showing Ezion Gibar south on the northern extremity of the Red Sea. All that indicates is that the region of Bosra has access to a port. But this is not a separate region to be conquered. It's simply a reminder that this territory has a port. The farmers earn more money for being in the plains rather than on the hills. So each player will continue to place players thus. Until all 6 patriarchs are placed. The Hebrew player is then allowed to place 1 patriarch in either the northern tribes or the southern tribes region. The advantage to the Hebrew player is that he will score for his patriarchs at the end of the game, whereas the heathens will not score at the end of the game. One rule in the setup which I have failed to follow in this example is that at least 3 patriarchs must be in the central Canaanite regions. In my case, blue have 3 patriarchs in the centre, but red so far only has 2, so we'll need to place 1, for example, on the plains there. We are now ready to play. The game is played over the course of 3 books. Starting with the invasion of Joshua into the Promised Land, the various judges and the various tribes that were being fought, into the realm of Saul and David and Solomon and the United Kingdom, then the divided kingdom. The 3rd book deals with the invasion by the Assyrians and then later the Babylonians, which put an end to the Hebrew kingdoms in the Promised Land. At the start of the 1st book, the heathens will take the book 1 cards, shuffle them, and each will be dealt 4 cards, which they will look at and choose 3 of these cards to keep, and this will represent the 3 turns that they take during the course of the book. The Hebrews similarly will take the book 1 cards. Because the Hebrew player is playing alone, he will be dealt 6 random cards, from which he will choose to keep 4. During book 1, the Hebrew player will take 4 turns, the 2 heathen players will each take 3 turns. The order of these turns are determined by the time track. The first card is Joshua, number 1. If anyone has that card, or in particular if the Hebrew player has chosen that card, he will take his turn now. If not, the next card is called out. Number 2, the Phoenicians. Again, if that card has been chosen, that player takes their turn. Then back to Joshua, card 3, and so on. So, for example, this is card 2, the Phoenicians. So this will be played second. The time track marker will keep track of where we are in the game. Let's take just a closer look at the card. The name of the tribe that is being played. The card number, that shows you the order in which it will appear. The number of units that that nation will get. And because it's a weaker card, and many in book one are weaker cards, 3 points are yours at the end of the game if you choose this card. The Philistines are a stronger card and will only earn you 1 point at the end of the game if you choose that. How does the turn work? First of all, let's take the example of the Philistines. Choose 4 units, in this case green as pictured on the card. 4 green units are now available for the heathen player to use to expand his Philistine kingdom. The rules for expanding a kingdom are that each territory can be conquered only from an adjacent territory. So in this case, the Philistines must conquer one of the adjacent territories to the only territory which they currently occupy. In the case of the heathen tribes, the territory must always be contiguous with the homeland. So, for example, although this is the same colour, it's not part of the Philistine kingdom because it's not contiguous with the homeland. You can't attack adjacent to that. If the game were to start with another nation occupying the Philistine homeland, then the very first move would be to take one of the 4 units and force a victory and take over the homeland. In this case, the Philistines do start in their own territory, so can expand to any neighbouring territory. Each expansion will cost 1 unit. When expanding, all units in the conquered territory are removed. In this case, the Canaanite unit, which should have been set up and wasn't, is removed back to the stock. The city and the temple are destroyed and placed in the city and temple area. The patriarch must move elsewhere and can move into an adjacent territory in the same kingdom. In this case, part of the Canaanite kingdom. The patriarch would be able to move there or to return to the blue player's hand. It will be up to the blue player which he feels is the most advantageous. If there is no place that the patriarch can move, either because there is no neighbouring kingdom or because it would break the rules of 2 priests or 2 blue patriarchs in the same area, then the patriarch goes back to the player's hand. But winning a territory means that you throw out all the other pieces and place your unit there instead. The one exception to this is the Ark of the Covenant. If you take over the territory containing the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark remains and you have captured the Ark. I will explain how territories are actually conquered in a moment. But first, a comment about the Hebrew players. The Hebrew players work slightly differently. They must still conquer lands which are adjacent to their colour. So if it was Joshua controlling the northern tribes, he would attack from somewhere that was adjacent to a yellow unit. But that doesn't have to be contiguous with the homeland, because strictly speaking, the Hebrews have no homeland. They have starting spaces where they begin their conquest, but no homeland. So even if this was no longer occupied by the yellow northern tribes, if there were yellow markers somewhere else on the map, the northern tribes would be able to continue expanding from there. And it is possible for the northern or the southern tribes to be split into more than one kingdom, where they were not contiguous with one another. In the case of the heathen nations, the kingdoms must always be contiguous to their homeland at the start. How does combat actually work? Attacking is, at its heart, very simple. The attacker rolls from 1 to 3 dice, depending on what is pictured on the card. In this case, the Philistines attacking in the hills would roll 1 dice. If they were attacking the plains, they would roll 3 dice. The attackers roll red dice. So, for example, if the Philistines wished to conquer the neighbouring Ashkelon, being plains, they would roll 3 dice. The defender always rolls only 1 white dice. When I say defender, it's not actually the players that defend, it's the land. So the land itself is defending. It doesn't really matter who rolls the die. In this case, the blue player has a patriarch there and may therefore have some interest in protecting the land, so it might be appropriate for the blue player to roll the defensive dice. But whoever rolls the defensive dice doesn't matter. So, for example, the defence scores 1, the attacking player rolls 3 dice, but only the highest one counts. In this case, 6 for the attack, 1 for the defence. If the attack is greater than the defence, then the conquest is successful. The unit committed to that attack is placed there. The patriarch must move somewhere else, and the kingdom has been expanded. There are bonuses to the defence. If 2 units are stacked on top of each other, and there can only ever be 2 at most stacked on top of each other, that gives a +1 bonus to the defence. If the territory contains a city, that gives a +1 bonus. If the territory is occupied by a unit the same colour as its homeland, then that gives a +1 bonus. So, for example, to attack this territory would have +1 for the city, +1 because it's the Moabite homeland, a defence of +2. If the units were stacked and there were 2 units, that would be a +3 defensive bonus, which is the maximum. In that case, a roll of 1 would have the added bonus of 3, that would become a 4, a 6 would still beat it. Although the Philistines in this case would have only been attacking the hills and only roll 1 dice, which still would have beaten it. The defensive bonus for being in one's homeland only applies to the heathen nations, the Moabites, Edomites, Egyptians, etc. As I've already said, the northern and southern tribes don't strictly have homelands, so they don't get a bonus, except they have the ark. If they have the ark, it's a +1 defensive bonus. If the ark is in a territory occupied by a non-Hebrew, it's a -1 defensive bonus. The ark is only ever used in defence, and it's only ever helpful to the Hebrew tribes and not the heathens. There is an attack bonus. If, for example, this attack against Ashkelon had failed, the marker on the combat chart is moved up to the next area, +1. The failure has cost 1 of the units, but we still had 1 left, so we can attempt a second time to attack Ashkelon, and this time the attacker would get a +1 bonus. If a second attack were to fail, then the attack bonus would increase to +2, and if that failed, the attack bonus would increase to +3. The attack bonus never goes beyond +3. So repeated attacks will cost units. Every attack uses up a unit, but keep going and eventually you may be successful. One final feature of combat is something called forced victory. If there is no defensive bonus, as for example in Ashkelon, no stacked units, no city, it's not the Canaanites' homeland or anyone else's homeland, no defensive bonus, it is possible to have a forced victory. In this case, the way of dealing with that depends on the number of dice rolled. The Philistines are able to roll 3 dice in the plains. That gives them an automatic forced victory. They can remove that unit and place their own unit in place without rolling any dice at all. If they were attacking into the hills, here for example, again there's no defensive bonus, but they're only allowed to roll 1 dice. In that case, they may take over the territory by sacrificing 1 unit. So if the Philistines had 2 units left, they can discard 1 in order to place the other as an automatic victory. If the nation had to roll 2 dice, for example the Arameans here would be rolling 2 dice, you can force a victory by sacrificing half a unit. How do you sacrifice half a unit? Because you don't want to be breaking the units in half. What you do is, instead of discarding a unit, you place it on the half counter there. This indicates that half the unit has gone, but there is another half unit remaining. If later in the same turn you need to discard another half unit, there it is. If by the end of the turn you've not used that half unit, it's discarded anyway and goes to waste. And that is how you attack other lands. There are other things that you may do with your units if you have enough of them. You may stack them. You may place 1 unit on top of another. You may build a city which costs 1 unit. You must have a city available because there are only ever 6 cities maximum. But I may wish to build a city in Ashdod, and that would cost 1 unit. You can build a temple. Again, there must be a temple available, and there's only ever 2 at any time. It must go where there is a city already, and it costs 2 units. So to build a city and a temple will cost you 3 units altogether. These must be placed in your own kingdom, and not in any other place of the part of the board. Finally, you can use a unit to gain money. 1 unit can be exchanged for any 1 coin of any denomination. 1 coin, silver, bronze or gold per unit. The number of units is limited, and if at the start you are told to take 4 units, for example, and there are not 4 in the stock, you would take as many as you can, but the remaining ones you would take as money. One other thing you may do in the kingdom building turn, which does not cost a unit, is to move the Ark of the Covenant. If the Ark is in your territory, which it is not at the moment, the Philistines don't control the Ark, but if they did, then you can move the Ark anywhere else within that same territory. If there is a priest in the same territory as the Ark, which there is here, if it's an opponent's priest, then it must move with the Ark, and that would limit the places you can put it because you couldn't move it somewhere where there's already a priest. If it was your own priest, you have a choice, you may move it or not as you choose. After kingdom building, you move on to actions. We'll stick with the Philistines as our example. There are 4 different sorts of actions you can take, and in my example, with 2 heathen players, each player will be allowed 3 actions. One action is to take money. You can take any 1 coin for 1 action of any colour. you could use your 3 actions to take 3 coins of any kind. Another action is to place a patriarch on the board. In this case, all the patriarchs are all ready, and say it was the red player who was playing. Their patriarchs are out already, but they may decide that they would rather have a farmer in a different place, so they may remove the farmer from there and place it there. Again, patriarchs must be placed legally with no other red patriarch, no other farmer, and in the kingdom that is active at the moment, the Philistine kingdom. Take money, place patriarch, move up on the royal track. This will cost coins. The first one, in this case, will cost 2 bronze, 2 silver and 2 gold coins. But it does give you a power, and that is to play 2 artifacts. I'll explain about those in a moment. It's also worth 3 victory points. So if you paid your money, again we'll imagine it's the red player, if the red player paid 2 of each, as an action they can move 1 up on the action track. You can also move up on the kingdom track, and to do this you don't need to pay anything, but your kingdom needs to have achieved whatever the feature is here. So for example, to build or destroy 1 city. In my example we have built 1 city, so we are able to move 1 up on the kingdom track. That's 1 action. The next one is to control 1 port. Well, the Philistine kingdom does not control a port, so can advance no further. Other actions are occupying 3 roads, these are the dotted lines, or 2 plains, or 3 plains. Here's a feature to note. When later in the game a player may have moved up to here and may have two actions, they can only move to the 2 plains and then the 3 plains if they occupy 5 plains altogether. These 3 must be different from these 2. Otherwise they can only move up 1, and they would have to wait until another turn to move up to the next one. The other thing to note is, as I mentioned earlier, the Hebrew players might have a kingdom that is in 2 separate areas, and in that case it's only 1 area which counts. So for example, occupying 3 roads would be alright if the 3 yellow areas were joined here together, but if there were 2 yellow counters here and another one down here and there was no connection, that doesn't count as occupying 3 roads. It must be 1 contiguous kingdom that is used to claim on the kingdom track. The reason for moving up on these tracks are that you score points at the end of the game. You score points not just for where your counter is, but for any previous counter. So moving up on the royal track is a way of scoring a good number of points. Some are just worth points. 1 of each money will give you 3 points. 3 of each money will give you 5 points. Some give you benefits. For example, once you reach this point, you are able to place 1 patriarch for free, and it doesn't cost an action. So during your action phase, place 1 patriarch for free. The authority token will allow you to buy 2 artifacts, and the one at the beginning, as I've already mentioned, allows you to play 2 artifacts. The last one in this case, and remember these come out randomly, so this could be early on in some games, allows you to take 2 coins when you take the action of taking a coin. This will cost any 3 coins to to move up onto this token. But when you've done that, you can use that ability and any previous ability. The abilities are cumulative. By the time you get to the end of the royal track, you were able to use all the abilities. The kingdom track simply will score you points. In my example, I've been using the Philistines, one of the heathen players, and I've said that they get 3 actions. In this example, the Hebrew player, being alone, has 4 turns, but each turn only 2 actions. But from the same choice of taking money, placing a patriarch, and moving up on the kingdom or the royal track. The next stage is collecting revenue. Each of your patriarchs will earn you money. The farmers will earn bronze money, and it contains a picture of a sheaf to remind you. If your farmer is in the plains, it will earn you 2 bronze coins. If your farmer is in the hills, such as the blue one, it will only earn 1 coin. The merchants will earn 2 silver coins if they are on a port. This territory, this territory, this territory are ports. If they're on a territory which has a dotted red line representing a road running through it, then that will earn 1 silver coin. The blue merchant will earn 1 coin for being on a road. The priests will earn points for being with the gold pieces. A priest in a city will earn 1. A priest with a temple will earn an additional 2, 3 altogether in this case. A priest with the ark will earn 1 gold coin. Priests earn gold coins, merchants silver, and farmers bronze. Then you may spend that on artifacts. Each artifact has a cost in the bottom right. In this case, 6 gold will allow you to buy the proliferate artifact. Only 1 artifact per turn may be bought unless you have passed the appropriate place on the royal track. At the end of the game, this will be worth 2 points, but you may use it during the action phase to place 2 of one of these patriarchs. I won't explain all the artifacts because this run through is going too long already, but all the artifacts and their abilities are explained in the booklet. You may only play 1 artifact per turn. Some of them have the word bonus on, such as the hill bonus. During your collect revenue phase, noted by CR, the hills will give you an extra bonus point. So farmers in hills will be worth 2 as well as farmers on plains, but that would still count as your 1 artifact action, one artifact use during your turn. So if you were using another artifact, you wouldn't be able to use this one as well. But this stays in play and you can use this each turn if you wish. Most other artifacts are used once and then turned face down to show that they've been used. At the end of each book, so once we've reached the end of book 1, more cards are handed out to the heathens and the Hebrews. Any artifacts that have been purchased, leaving gaps, will be refilled from the bag, so that again there are a full 20 artifacts available, and turn will proceed as before. At the end of the 3rd book, we come to scoring. The scoring comes from the royal track. Each counter that the player's token is on or has passed will be worth, in this case, 3 points, 3 points, 2 points, 4 points, 4 points. Similarly, the kingdom track, depending on how far up, the red player will get 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 2 points. Any artifacts that have been collected during the course of the game are worth 1, 2 or 3 points each, and that includes artifacts that have been used and are face down. They're turned face up again. So these are the three main ways of earning victory points. You also will gain victory points for the weaker cards that you may have used during the game. You will gain points for money. Every 5 gold coins is worth 1 victory point. Every 5 silver is worth 1 victory point. Every 5 bronze worth 1 victory point. In this case, only the green player will score 1 point. The others don't have 5 coins. And finally, the Hebrew player and the Hebrew player only will score points for any remaining patriarchs which are on the board. In this case, we have a priest by an ark who would normally bring in 1 gold income, and that will score 1 point. A merchant, a Hebrew merchant in a port, for example here, would normally bring in 2 income and would be worth 2 points. But that only applies to the Hebrew patriarchs as compensation for the fact that they don't get to place them at the start of the game. Finally, I've been giving an example of 2 heathen players and 1 Hebrew player. What is the difference if there are other than 3 players? In a 2-player game, there is 1 Hebrew player and 1 heathen player. Both draw 6 cards at the start of each book and keep 4, so both have 4 turns each. Both take 2 actions during their turn. In a 4-player game, each player will draw 4 cards and keep 3, 2 heathens, 2 Hebrews, and each player will take 3 actions on their turn. In a 6-player game, there will be 3 heathen players and 3 Hebrew players. Each player will draw 3 cards and keep 2, so they will only take 2 turns, but they will get 4 actions on each of those turns. And when there are 3 players in the same team, Hebrew or heathen, then those patriarchs will earn 1 extra coin over and above what they would normally earn. When there are 3 players, it's a team of 2 against 1, and when it's 5 players, it's a team of 3 against 2, but following the same rules. It works out nicely balanced, even though it might seem that there are different numbers of turns. There are always 8 or 9 actions taken per book, and as they're the things that will move you up on the kingdom and royal track and get your patriarchs placed on the board, the number of actions is nicely balanced. And that is how you play Promised Land.